Hey friends, it's Sam from DIY Huntress, and fun fact of the day, I originally was not gonna do a video for this project. But here's the thing, I recently shared a sneak peek of this project on my Instagram page and a whole bunch of people reached out asking for tutorials, so here we are. Now this project today is part one of a much larger dream bedroom makeover for my parents. Dream both literally and figuratively. And since I'm designing a room for my parents, when I asked my mom what she really wanted in her room, what she said was that wall with all of the squares on it. So today I'm gonna show you how I created a DIY board and batten wall, AKA the wall with all the squares on it. And part two of this project will be revealed in the full bedroom makeover video. So definitely make sure to subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell if you're interested in checking that out. In the meantime though, this was a very big project, so let's get started. I teamed up with my friends at the Home Depot to help make this project come to life with the use of their Home Depot mobile app and their project calculators. So as I mentioned in my introduction, this project is actually part of a much bigger project, which is the bedroom makeover for my parents. So in this video, we're kind of starting in an awkward place here because I had already done a little bit of work in this space before getting to this project in particular. So I'm going to try my best to catch you up to speed. Long story short, my parents have been renovating their home for the past few years, and even though they've touched basically every room and I've helped them tackle a few, as you can see on my channel, they haven't touched their main bedroom. And so as a gift to my mom and my dad for Father's Day, Mother's Day, I offered to make over their bedroom, and my mom was like, heck yeah. Now, I'll be tackling the design of the bedroom and all of the ideas my mom had that I was able to integrate into this space for her in that full bedroom makeover video, so definitely make sure to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in seeing that very soon. But in an effort to catch everyone up to speed, basically the one thing my mom really asked for in this room was a board and batten accent wall, or like I said, the wall with all the squares on it. So before I could even think about getting started on tackling the design features of the wall, there were a lot of things that I had to do first, including removing the trim from that very awkward window, and also patching up any holes or openings or weird ridges that were around that window and also on the entire wall itself. Now here's the thing, the idea of installing a board and batten wall is not like all that original. It's been done a lot of times in a lot of different shapes and variations and colors. In fact, you can find tons of different tutorials for how to do board and batten walls all over the internet. So when it came time for inspiration for the type of wall that my mom wanted, I did take a lot of inspiration from Home Depot's app. On this app, they have a whole how-to section with different ideas for styling your bedroom or choosing different accent walls. This was a really great resource to help my mom kind of visualize what she wanted her space to look like. The other thing I had to keep in mind is that even though I can sometimes see what I want to do in my head, it is hard for other people to understand my vision until it's actually done. So help my mom kind of visualize what I was going to be doing as well as see the spacing a little better, I decided to tape out the design. And this is something that I've done before in other projects and it's worked really well for her to see it. So doing that made her really comfortable with what my vision was for the space. And luckily the boards I was using were the exact same width as two pieces of painter's tape next to each other. So I was able to space out everything perfectly. Also super lucky because this wall was perfectly 16 feet wide and 10 feet tall at the highest peak, so I was able to do the math pretty quickly, but I'm not gonna lie, taping out this wall definitely took a long time. Do you ever have one of those moments where you're like, why did I agree to do this project again? I am 100% having one of those moments on the floor of this bedroom right now. Here's where we are, and here is why I'm having this moment. Weirdest angle ever, sorry. But basically, as you can see, I taped out all of the vertical lines and the border lines. I did a couple of horizontals, but I only had to do it in one day just to figure out the spacing. So now that that's figured out, it's gonna be consistent across the entire wall. I don't have to worry about that. So I'm gonna rip those out, those tape lines out tomorrow. And then once I have all the lumber, I'm going to replace each one of those blue tape lines with the lumber as I go to start with the verticals and then move on to the horizontals. And there are some weird angles going on up by that ceiling, so this project should be fun. So yeah, eventually I will find my way off of this floor and into my truck and off to Home Depot. But for now, I'm just gonna like hang out here for a second. So I will hopefully see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. After getting the thumbs up of approval from my mom on the design and making a trip to Home Depot, I was able to bring back a whole bunch of 1x4 boards. Another option that's actually a bit more budget friendly would be some pre-painted MDF. But again, you can definitely use MDF or pine for this project. I think my biggest piece of advice though would be to use something that is pre-primed, because it's going to make your life so much easier later when you have to paint the entire wall. At this point though, I was finally able to get started on the part that I actually like the best, which is building, and I started to measure out all of the frame pieces first and then cut them on a miter saw that I actually did set up in the bedroom, because it was much easier to do this than to lug all of the pieces up and down the stairs, or really 2 flights of stairs from the bedroom all the way to my workshop and back. And although cutting the straight frame pieces on the bottom of the wall were pretty straightforward, there were 2 outlets that I did have to work around. So I originally used my jigsaw to notch out where those outlets were so I could just kind of stick the covers back on the wall. I ended up changing my mind on this later. You'll see this in a little bit, but this is an option in case you do have an outlet in the way. I then began to work in smaller sections, removed the tape from each section I was working in, and then attached my boards to the wall using brad nails. But once I was done with that bottom frame, it was then time to move to the top of the wall, which was a little more tricky than the bottom. Okay, so I'm at the part of this project that I've been dreading since I started, and that is cutting the trim around that window. So I'm gonna cut one long piece that goes all the way across, and then I have to scribe the shape of the window. So I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. What came first, the window or the ceiling? My theory is, and my parents' theory is that window was put in first and then they dropped the ceiling, because there's only like that much space between the top of the window and the ceiling. This window is just like the bane of my existence right now. I asked my mom if I could close it up and she said no. I don't know what I was expecting her to say, but yeah, so that window's staying. So since it's staying, I have to trim around it. So to do that, I'm gonna use this Baby Gap / Sam size pencil and basically put the piece of trim up there, get my hand up on in the window, trace the shape I need, and then cut it out with the jigsaw. And then it should fit perfectly in theory. Let's see how this goes. Wish me luck. I feel like that was pretty self-explanatory, and the process did work okay. I was able to get my hand on up in there and trace the shape that I needed. It was a little light though, so I also ended up removing the tape from the top of the window and then placing that on the board as well to just give myself a better guide for where I was cutting with the jigsaw. But either way, this method totally worked. I will show you another method for finding some weird angles later in this project, because trust me, there were plenty of weird angles to work with throughout this entire project. But for this one, just kind of scribing or tracing out that shape and cutting it with my jigsaw worked perfectly. Sometimes you just have to get really creative with the space that you're working in, because A, not every house is perfectly square, and B, sometimes houses come with strange windows like this one, so you just gotta work with what you got. But on this trend of having to find strange angles, on the next couple of pieces I had to work with the vaulted ceilings. So to do this, I actually used an angle finder to help me find the perfect angle to cut my pieces. Honestly, this thing was a total time saver. I was able to transfer what I needed directly to my pieces, bring them over to my miter saw, move the miter saw to match the angle, and then cut it out with my head blocking the camera. Sorry about that. And then put it back on the wall. Unfortunately, though, because these walls are not perfectly square, I did run into a little bit of an issue. Okay, so when I was trying to hang this before, this is much lower than that part of the ceiling. So when I was hanging it up, it looked like that. So this was hanging down from that a little too low. So what I decided to do was just take this over to the table saw and trim off this piece. And now this matches up. So it's a little skinnier, but honestly, it now matches there, and it was easier than me adding another piece of trim there. So we are good to go. So let me hang this up, and we're gonna move on. Crisis averted. Honestly, I feel like some people might get frustrated by things like this, but I think that the beauty of doing custom work in a space is that you have to get creative. And especially when you're working in an older house like my parents' house, which is almost 100 years old at this point, it's definitely a lot of fun sometimes to figure out how to customize things to fit. That being said though, I'm sure you can kind of see as I am installing things that these walls are just not perfectly straight. So I tried my best to make everything as flush as possible. But once those border pieces were done, everything else was kind of smooth sailing, minus the window. We'll get there in a bit. But other than that, the verticals went in pretty easily, and I just attached them using brad nails. I opted to not use an adhesive in case anybody in the future ever wants to take this wall down. It probably would have made my life a little easier to use an adhesive because the walls are not perfectly straight. But honestly, the brad nails worked perfectly, and I was able to get these vertical pieces up within a couple of hours of work. I got a couple up on the first day, and then I got the rest of them up the next day. Okay, this project is never ending. So as I complete this second day of verticals, there are a couple things that I learned along the way that I wanted to share. First was that having a level around was a total lifesaver because I was able to make sure that every piece was perfectly straight. Also, this is true with any type of lumber that you purchase from any type of big box store, but I definitely made sure to cut both ends of my pieces to make sure that they were perfectly square before hanging them. Also, if you are working with walls like the one that I was working with, where they're not perfectly straight and they kind of bow in some places, using an adhesive will help the boards contour to the walls a lot better. I actually kind of wish that I used an adhesive in hindsight, but at this point I was way too far in, and I was able to fill a lot of those gaps with caulking later anyway, so that did work, but it probably would have saved me some time. Ugh, watching this, I don't know why I'm like prematurely celebrating here, because then I had to move on to the horizontals, which were their own little challenge. But luckily, taping everything out earlier in the project helped me to realize where the space needed to be. I was able to space everything out pretty evenly, and to do that, I used a spacer that I cut from some scrap wood. Decided then to actually cut out 2 spacers, which made my life 10 times easier, and then used those along every single box that I was making so that they were all the same exact size. It was actually at this point in the project that I changed my mind about the outlets as well, because no matter how I spaced out this wall, I was running into some sort of issue where the board was running into an outlet or a switch. So I decided to cut around each one of these and kind of box them out or frame them out a little bit and use an extender to pull that out from the wall. And instead of kind of trying to pretend like it didn't exist, I just emphasized it a little bit and added this little decorative touch, and it worked out really well. But in all honesty, after figuring out what to do with all of the outlets or the switches, after that, the rest of the horizontal portion of this wall went up very, very quickly, which was awesome. The only time that I had to kind of take a moment to breathe and think a little bit was on the 2 pieces that hit the sides of the ceilings that were vaulted, but I actually used my angle finder here to just figure out that angle. I transferred it to the piece where I needed to cut it, used my jigsaw to cut it out, and then I was able to attach it to the wall perfectly. I then was able to call it a day on this part of the project because I knew that the next day I'd have to deal with the window. Nailed it! Pun definitely intended. Good job, Sam. You pat yourself on the back for that one. So after taking the night to figure out how I was going to do the window, I decided to cut some very thin trim pieces from some leftover pine, and I found all the angles that I needed for the window and then attached them all using a brad nail. And I did have to use some shims here or there because the walls were not perfectly straight, but it totally worked out. Probably shouldn't happy dance on the ladder, but I really want to. I was honestly just feeling so grateful for all those times that my dad would take me to job sites as a teenager and make me do all of the trim work in houses, because it definitely came in handy for this project. Unfortunately though, even though the trim work was looking pretty great, if I must say so myself, I definitely had to fill in gaps and seams, so I decided to do this to the entire wall using some white caulking. I worked square by square until every single gap was filled, and I also made sure to fill in all of the holes from the brad nailer as well to just give everything this super clean and seamless look. This was honestly probably the most time-consuming part of the entire project, but it also is one of the most important because it really took this from like a DIY job to looking really professional. And luckily I was able to take a nice break, aka go to sleep, because after finishing this part of the project, I left it overnight to dry, and then the next day it was time to come back and start painting the entire wall. Good thing I watched enough Dexter to teach me how to do this the right way. Okay friends, let's talk about the painting process. So I decided that since this was such a gigantic project that I was going to bust out the sprayer. I don't usually use the sprayer for indoor projects. I actually often use my sprayer for more of like finishing my woodworking projects or doing outdoor projects. But this one just felt like a no-brainer. There was just so much square footage to cover and so many nooks and crannies that using a roller and a paintbrush was probably going to take really long. So I decided instead to take some of those extra minutes and just cover everything up to prevent overspray from hitting the walls and the floor and the ceiling. And then once everything was covered, it was time to get started with the sprayer. I can't believe I still have to paint this thing. Let's see, is this thing working? Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. How's my hair look? Okay, all right. Hi, my name is Sam, and today I'll be auditioning for the role of RV lab assistant on the next season of Breaking Bad. This thing is like 10 sizes too big. All right, we're gonna access it. Let's see what we can do here. I think that's better. I'm ready for my close-up. For today's audition, I'm going to be painting an accent wall. I hope you enjoy it. Ugh, I can't believe I have to paint this whole wall. Okay, fine, I'll do it. Why did I agree to this? And I look like I'm ready to fight karate. But actually the only thing I'm ready to fight is this wall. So after suiting up and getting a little weird, it was time to start painting, and luckily Home Depot's app has this awesome paint calculator to help you calculate how much paint you need for a project without buying too much or too little. So I did use that paint calculator for this entire room, but specifically for that back wall, and I was able to get away with using 1 gallon of paint for 2 coats of coverage. And even though covering up the ceilings and the walls and the window and the floor and all that stuff took a little bit of time, I was actually able to get this entire wall painted in under 2 hours by using the sprayer, so to me that was a total win. And side note, can we talk about this color choice? Because I'm obsessed with it. My mom specifically wanted this color. She went to Home Depot with me and was like, that's the one, and that's what I made happen for her, and I feel like it just totally transformed this entire wall. So after painting, I allowed everything to sit for maybe an hour, and then I peeled back all of the tape and all of the plastic because I didn't want that to dry overnight. If it dried overnight, it could peel the paint away from some of the things I painted. But after peeling away all of that plastic, I was so excited because this wall looked amazing. It is seriously insane how much this back wall transformed this entire space. I am so excited with the way it turned out, but my mom is even more excited about the way that it turned out. This was a big project that definitely took a while to complete, but it was so worth it. I seriously cannot wait to share what this final space looks like with all of you because it looks epic. I will be sharing all of the details about this bedroom makeover as well as the full before and after on my channel very soon, so if you are interested in checking that out, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell. In the meantime, friends, I hope that you loved this project as much as my mom did, and I cannot wait to share some more with you on my channel very soon. But until then, friends, happy DIYing.